Pride of Detroit PODcast. After one of our weirder breaks we've had, we're trying to talk about the Lions again. Jeremy, I think you said during the break, or at least Morgan did. And actually, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to attribute what Morgan said to you, Jeremy. But Morgan made in tone that this draft, as we look at our subject, is basically worst case, best case scenarios in the first round. Nightmare dream scenarios for picks 6 and 18. And Morgan, I want you to kind of lead where you're going with this because I disagree with it just because I know how hazardous this fan base can be. But you said there's not a lot of scenarios where you're going to be completely out of your mind depending on what the Lions do.
Yeah, there's just because of for the first time in, well, at least my adult life, right? So I'm 32 years old. This is by far the best position they've been in before the draft. Like, they went and plugged up a bunch of the holes that we had perceived, prior to free agency, to the point where, like, okay, they don't have to draft a corner. They probably need to. They don't have to. Blah blah blah. And they've just put themselves in a position where they can do so many different things that you can justify, like on a factual, objective basis, that you can't really get mad. I know people are going to get mad one way or another because they want it to go their way, their mock draft or whatever, But yeah, there's not, outside of a few things, which I'm sure we'll get into, there's not really many things that they can do to just make me really angry towards Brad Holmes or any of them.
Yeah, I'm actually right there with you. In terms of personally speaking, yeah, I don't think there's a lot the Lions can do, including drafting Bijan Robinson, that's going to really piss me off. But there are some things that I'll certainly raise an eyebrow to and be like, it's not what I would have done, but let's see how Dan Campbell spins it into gold.
Jeremy, why are you lying like that?
I've said multiple times, and I remain to say that if the Lions draft Bijan Robinson, I'm not going to lose my mind. I'm not going to be happy, but I'm not going to lose my mind. I'm going to hold you to it.
I'm going to be hosting draft night. You're going to come in here at 8 when they take him at 18.
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure our entire podcast is going to be about why did you take Bijan Robinson when Joey Porter was right there or something.
Sure. But let's spin that into discussion. Let's just start with the negative. Let's start with what is your guys' worst case scenario with their first pick. And I say first pick because maybe
number
it's not
6.
Just 6.
Let's start with 6, right?
Who wants to go first? Who wants to be the harbinger of doom?
The Dungeon of Doom.
Okay,
we can't say that on this podcast.
Personally,
that's true.
Personally, is that how we're asking this?
Sure. Yeah. Your worst.
You're
case
in charge.
Yep.
I want no part of Will Levis at 6. 0 parts. Like 0%. I'd rather have all of the other quarterbacks before him. Like, that's where I'm at right there. Worst case scenario.
Including Hendon Hooker?
Mm-hmm. He's almost as old as Hendon Hooker. That's the crazy thing too. People don't realize. Like, we get on Hendon Hooker because he's ancient, but Hendon Hooker, and he puts, we can talk about the mayonnaise thing another time, but
please let's not ever talk about the mayonnaise in the coffee. That's not a euphemism either. That's something that's actually done. I think we were talking before the break too about like how weird it is about the amount of backlash of Will Levis, and I think there's been some reasons I think for the decline in his production, but I also think I agree with most people like that compared to the other 3 of the top quarterbacks here. I understand he doesn't really move the needle. And to go back to a name that I just chided Jeremy about, like, I think the nightmare scenario for me would be Bijan Robinson at 6, which is apparently what I just ran a mock draft simulator just to get the names up in front of me. It started when I didn't want it to, and it had the Lions taking Bijan at 6.
Oh, which one was that?
I think it will remain nameless, just not to give it notoriety.
Okay,
but
that's fair.
Like,
that's a good idea.
Okay, but I mean, Bijan himself, he's not going to be in the top 10. Like, I understand people. I even understand the idea of taking Bijan Robinson, but I absolutely do not agree that he's someone who will go in the top 10 because that day and age, like, your running backs in this day and age are in the field less and less. And I know we're in an age where people are either pining for the past of running backs or talking about how you can run heavy with a team, but I don't know, like one of the guys I work with at Fox Sports Radio is talking about, man, just give me a feature back. And I had to tell him there's no such thing as a feature back anymore. If you draft a running back, they're going to see like maybe 30, maybe 40% of the offensive snaps. It's just how running backs work. And that's been the objection about running backs has been the usage amount on them has dipped. It's dipped low.
And they're certainly not going to play this guy 80% of the time when they just handed Dave Montgomery $7 million a year, $6 million a year, whatever it was.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Like they just, and Montgomery is fantastic, and they have a known value in Montgomery for what he can do on the field.
Yeah. The Saquon Barkleys are the rarity. Like he toted the rock like 300 plus times last year. And that's why him and New York are in this standstill right now, because he's
and Barkley kept getting hurt.
Yeah. And
before this year, he kept getting hurt.
Kept getting binged. And then this year he was healthy, and they want to play him under the franchise tag, and he's probably thinking they're going to hand it to me 300 times again. And I just, I get it from both sides, but yeah.
It's just, I don't object to taking Bijan, but at 6, the value that you're giving up for any other of those picks that would probably be available there is why I call it my nightmare scenario.
I'm going to play my nightmare scenario a little bit closer to reality, because while I agree with both of you guys, those two things would be horrible, I don't think either are very likely.
Agreed.
The things that are likely that would be really crappy for this team, trading up for Anthony Richardson. I'm sorry, Chris. I don't like that move at all. I think that is way too overly risky for this team right now. They don't listen. I think a lot of people look at their roster, look at their situation, and say, hey, this is the time to take a risk. You've got a good roster. You've got a bunch of draft picks. You can absorb a bad hit by taking a swing like this. And there is some truth to that. But at the same time, you don't need to force this quarterback issue at all. You don't. Like, I understand you won't have the draft capital next year. I understand you have to pay Jared Goff down the road if he's your dude. But I'm with what Dan Campbell has said, is where, like, yes, we are going to look at quarterbacks, but we're not going to force this issue. There is no reason to force this issue, especially on a prospect that the range of just belief in this guy can be so good, or this guy might be a complete bust. Like, there is just way too much indecisiveness it's just a really hard overlook of a guy like him. So trading up to 3 to get him, which I think is going to cost this team a heck of a lot more than just 48. I think that's almost a nightmare scenario. And before you jump in really quick, my only other one, and this is a mild nightmare, but if 3 quarterbacks go before the Lions, and then Jalen Carter and Will Anderson also go in front of the Lions, and the Lions aren't able to trade out of that, that is like a low-key nightmare scenario, because I don't like any of those guys.
I was going to ask that. After responding to you on AR, is like, what happens if we get to this where Carter, Anderson, 3 quarterbacks are off the board, and you're basically looking at 6, and you can't trade down, and you're like, I guess we take Christian Gonzalez? And I'm not demeaning Christian Gonzalez. I think he's a great athlete. But that does feel like, with the potential in the top 6 picks of this draft, if you're sitting there at 6 without those premier defensive line and quarterback talents, trying to figure out what you can do, and nobody wants to dance with you to move up to 6. That's kind of a bad, that's a worst case scenario, I think.
Yeah. Worst case realistic scenario. Like, but listen, am I going to be crying if they're walking home with Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez? No, like, that's fine.
Not in the least.
Not in the least. A lot of people are saying Tyree Wilson. I'm not on board at 6. I'm sorry. I'm just not. I think he's.
I don't understand where this thing, like this week, like people are saying Tyree. I saw a couple places putting Tyree Wilson above Will Anderson. I think people are just bored in the draft process.
Yeah.
No way in hell.
Listen, he's a monster of a person. His physical stature is ridiculous. His athleticism is good. He's got long arms, but he's slow off the snap. He's dealing with some injuries. The foot injury is something you have to obviously clear first. And I don't know. I feel like he's a little bit too raw of a prospect. I don't know how much faith I have in the Lions' new defensive line coach yet to put a project in his hands right away. So Tyree Wilson at 6 is maybe not nightmare scenario, but I'm feeling pretty underwhelmed by that pick, if that's what it is.
I apologize. Morgan, if you could let me, I want to go real quick back to the AR thing. I think for me, I've always said AR makes sense if he's there at 6. I agree with you. Like, I would not be happy about trading up. I would only say that If they trade up, though, like we've seen Holmes get really excited about guys he really wants before.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason it would stay off my board if he decides to trade up. But I kind of get it. Like, and also, like, we've talked about this before. I remember I saw the clip today about Adam Schefter trying to talk about it might not go like 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever he was saying. But I think we talked about this a couple of years ago, Jeremy. Like, before that Lawrence, Wilson, Lance draft, it hadn't happened since 1999 with Couch and McNabb and I forget who the third quarterback. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Either way, it doesn't happen a lot.
Yeah, and I think I'm with like it. There's
which is why I agree with you. You don't need to force
Right.
the issue at 3 to get AR.
The question is, and you know, if the smoke around Houston is true that they're not enamored with any quarterback not named Bryce Young, and they might go defense, do you go up and get CJ Stroud? And that's an entirely different conversation. And obviously, the Lions brought him in
because I mean, yeah, and it sounds like, you know, the Colts want to be quarterback hungry now too.
Right, so you'd have to jump them at 4. So I don't know. CJ Stroud is not a nightmare scenario for me. It's one that will definitely be divisive in Detroit. But that to me is a more acceptable aggressive trade up than
right. No, I think I agree. There's less risk in someone like CJ Stroud,
and I am a risk averse person.
No, I get it, especially if you're going to put resources into it.
Yeah.
So,
best case scenarios at 6. Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Jalen Carter falls to 6.
Yep. Damn.
I'm very skeptical that the Lions are as enamored with him as I am, but I think it's a home run if he falls to 6 and the Lions, and I'd almost be a little bit encouraged, right, that the Lions are willing to maybe not toe this very line of like, oh, we can't take any character. It's like, no, like you're a good franchise with a good foundation, a good environment, a good, you know, characters in the locker room. Sometimes you're not gonna like. There's guys that are unsavable, right? I don't think Jalen Carter is necessarily that guy. Put him in the right environment, put him around talented players, and let him wreak havoc. And so if he falls to 6, I'm gonna be minorly disappointed if the Lions don't take it. I'll still understand, and again, I still think they probably would skip over him. But to me, that is like, you don't spend any extra resources to go get him. He just kind of falls into your lap. Maybe the best player in this draft, and just so happens to be at the team's biggest need. That's a dream scenario for me.
Dream scenario for me. Kind of the same fall into your lap category, but with Will Anderson. I find it unlikely to happen, but thinking about this, assuming everyone goes crack level addicted on quarterbacks this draft, and we do get some unholy alignment of 1, 2, 3, 4. And Seattle, and we've talked about this a bit before. Seattle has no problem with character issues too, and they decide they want to go for someone like Jalen Carter. Hell, I'd even take a trade up scenario if it looks like you could probably go for Will Anderson. I think he is the best player in this draft, period. Like talent, like independent of any position, Will Anderson is the best player in this draft.
I'm gonna piggyback right off Chris's point then and just go, you took mine, but I was gonna say take one of these extra picks that Holmes has accumulated and move up and get Will Anderson, man. Pair Will Anderson with Hutchinson for the next however long, and you're gonna be off and running. Your defense is gonna be so much better right there just to have those two pillars on the edge. They can move around. Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Aaron Glenn would be, I think he'd probably smile for a month straight.
I will say, if the Lions, and Chris is going to hate me, if the Lions trade down, they can still get like a Devin Witherspoon at 11. That is also.
No, I don't mind.
Also
I don't mind that.
value.
I'm trying to test how far I could take Jeremy. I'm like, Jeremy, if they trade up for Will Anderson, will you accept trading up? No, he shakes his head. No,
I don't think so. No, I feel
for
like
the best player in this draft.
I feel like the only if you're trading from 6 to 3, you better be grabbing a quarterback.
No, I can understand that then. I can understand that if that's your opinion. Sure, sure.
What's the like Mendoza line for too much for you though, Jeremy? Like to move from 6 to 3, like in terms of capital.
For an edge for Will Anderson or for
Yeah,
a
or just in
quarterback?
general, just to move up.
It
Just
might
to
be
move up.
different if we're talking Will Anderson or a quarterback. I might be more willing to do it if
For Stroud.
for Stroud I might shell out like a 2024 first and maybe your 48 or whatever. Like you're going for it. You're getting a franchise quarterback. If it's for Will Anderson, I don't know if I would do anything more than like 48.
48 and maybe like a 2023 day 2 or something like
Something like
along
that.
those lines. Like,
That's still pushing
yeah.
it to me for an edge that isn't a pressing need.
What if it's not to go to 3? What if it's to go to 4? What if it, like
The
we
Colts
do
have
go 1,
lost
2,
their
3?
mind.
What?
All right,
What if
let's
the
go
Colts
off.
have lost their mind?
But I'm saying like if Ursay doesn't run the damn team, I'm sorry, but like if it goes 1, 2, 3 on the quarterbacks, and suddenly they're like, yeah, we don't like anything here, we're going to punt a bit,
Yeah.
and Holmes makes grabby arms for Will Anderson.
I mean, I guess it doesn't matter. It's still the same price, right? Like,
Is it?
I don't want to give up more than 48. I mean, for me, like my
I feel
line
that.
is
Yeah.
still the same because you're
Okay.
grabbing the same player.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Let's move on to 18 then. We want to talk like a little deeper. So we're going a little deeper in the draft now. You've probably seen Witherspoon and Gonzalez go. Questions whether Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be there. People keep asking about like wide receivers for the Lions in the first round. I don't really see it. But what's kind of let's go the opposite way. What does your dream scenario at 18 look like, Jeremy?
I think if I can connect it to my dream scenario at 6, it's getting your defensive tackle, ideally Jalen Carter at 6, and then getting your corner of the future at 18, and that would probably be Deonte Banks. I think Jalen Carter, Deonte Banks is my ideal like pie in the sky A+ draft for Brad Holmes. I mean,
You're
might
not
as well
buying
start
into
calling
like
him
Joey
Draft Holmes.
Porter or someone.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love Joey Porter, but he's not getting past the Steelers. Like,
Really? Yeah.
like he's such a perfect fit for the Steelers that if he's
Mike
still on the
Tomlin
board
guy.
at 15 or, I mean, Joey Porter was a classic Steeler. It's too perfect of a fit there. But yeah, Deonte Banks is kind of the one guy I'm circling. If they aren't going corner, I don't know. Like, I feel a lot of Kalijah Cansey hate, and I think I'd be down.
I think most people think of Cansey as like a day 2 guy, but like
He's
a really
starting to
early
slide
day
in that
2.
conversation a
Yeah.
bit, and I understand he's super undersized. Brzee, I should say. I'm starting to say his name right. Brzee or Cansey, I think, are legitimate picks here, and obviously they're two very different style defensive tackles. But if you don't go defensive tackle, if you don't get Jalen Carter there at 6, I don't mind filling that need at 18. You don't have to. If you don't like those guys, don't push it. But I think that's decent value there of guys that can contribute and be decent immediate impact, really.
My dream, probably I'll go in a different direction and go Darnell Wright. I would love to get Darnell Wright at 18, and you're set for a while. Then you're in a good position to eventually pay Jonah, because you're going to need to get cheap somewhere else if you're going to have to pay Jonah, because it's going to quickly become a really expensive offensive line. Ask the Eagles. So yeah, going in a different direction. If they going in the trenches either way. I was going to say Cansey. You kind of said Cansey, so I was going to say Cansey, Wright. Trenches would be great. The corner would be fine. Like, I would love Brian Banks here. There's a lot of things they could do to make me happy here.
Eric has indoctrinated you into the Darnell Wright crowd.
I'm just an offensive line enthusiast, man.
That's fair.
You complete the gauntlet. Like, similar to my argument for Darnell Wright or Darnell Washington earlier.
Right.
Like, you would just start being able to, even more so, hopefully, be able to just pummel people.
So what do you do with Darnell Wright in year 1? Do you have him as a swing tackle, or do you kind of insert him in there to the right guard?
I'd let him try for right guard. I would say it's an open competition. I think that would bring out a really good competition between him and Glasgow, Big V, and Darnell Wright competing for right guard. And then if he's not ready, then he's swing tackle for a year. It's not a bad gig. And that's another, it speaks to the position the Lions roster is in, man, because how far have we come to where, like, your 18th overall pick? Yeah, it's okay if he sits for a year.
Right.
Wow.
And I think Lions. I've said this before on the podcast. I think Lions fans are going to have to start getting used to rookie classes not being as heavy of contributors as they were in the first 2 years because the roster is better.
That's always a sign that your roster is doing well. Yeah.
Right.
Reset expectations
Yep.
as the roster develops.
This is hard for me to come up with a dream scenario for this because I feel like there's so many ways the Lions could go.
Sure.
Like all you guys are like, and I feel like I'm going to take a page from Jeremy's playbook. It's to trade down like 5 spots and still get one of these guys because I feel like the opportunity value is there. And I think like, yeah, even if like maybe you miss on like on Banks, like you trade down a bit and maybe Keely Ringo is still there or something. Like or maybe like you decide, hey, let's zig a little bit, and what we just talked about with tight ends, and there's a tight end there near the end of the first rather than in the middle of the first. You go and try your hand at that. Like there's I think the second half of this draft gets really interesting on how much it's open up on different possibilities at different positions. And the Lions are in a position where they've done their homework and they've rounded out their roster very well that they could go and upgrade in a lot of different directions. Maybe they just wait till close towards the end of the first round. They're like, you know what? We could really use a linebacker.
And it's only going to open up as the draft goes on, right? Like,
right.
It's going to be more and more like, I don't know who they're going to pick in round 3 or they have a round 3. They don't have a round 4. As you get deeper and deeper, it's just like, I think you're going to see Brad Holmes get even closer and closer to like strict best player available. He's basically said like he's very best player available in general. But I think as you get deeper in the draft, it's just going to be like, I don't know, let's take an offensive tackle. Let's take a tight end. Let's take a off-ball linebacker. You know what?
I wouldn't be mad if they decide to take a wide receiver.
Oh, no. I think there's a long-term need there for sure.
Right.
I sure hope they don't do it in the first round, and maybe that's my nightmare scenario, because I really think if I'm...
What, you wouldn't like a Jordan Addison?
No, I wouldn't, honestly.
Oh.
Jackson Smith-Njigba is the only first-round receiver I would pick. And I don't
Not even Quentin Johnson?
Nope.
No, really?
He had like 8 drops last year.
He's a big body and he can run, but yeah, I'm not in the first round.
Yeah,
I can't hate on Addison just because you know the reason.
Sure, of course.
Fair.
Yeah.
You want
go on?
Well, yeah. Wide receiver wasn't going to be my answer for worst case scenario. I think it's one of two things. It's off ball linebacker, because I think the positional value is maybe even worse than running back. And so I can also throw Bijan into the conversation. I'll spare you guys of me going on another running back in the first round rant. I think if they go, whoever it is, whether it's Drew Sanders, maybe they really like Jack Campbell, I'd be pretty disappointed with the Lions doing that in the first round. Jack Campbell, maybe with their second round, I'd be okay with. But if they get really grabby for an off-ball linebacker, I would, be shocked. To be pretty disappointed, because I don't think there's good value there. And it would also take away snaps from guys like Malcolm Rodriguez and Derek Barnes, who I think are capable players in this league, maybe potentially even really good ones.
I am a Jack Campbell enjoyer, but I also would agree that I would absolutely not like to see the Lions take a first round pick on him. I would rather wait for day 2 for Jack Campbell to enjoy it properly.
Yeah.
Linebacker in the first round is like stomping and screaming about positional value grounds for me. So no, absolutely not.
We haven't talked about it, and I'm looking there deep, and I'm trying to think, like, how would we feel if the Lions, I guess this isn't nightmare or dream scenarios or anything, but like we talked a little bit about taking offensive line talent, but like, where is that threshold for you? Is 18 acceptable to take offensive line talent?
Oh yeah, Darnell Wright at 18 all day. Like, I feel like that's like a Brad Holmes, depending on how high he values Darnell Wright, like, because we know that Brad Holmes values like the offensive line and the defensive line. Like, he spent premium capital on both in his short time in Detroit. And if he values Darnell Wright like I think he does, then I bet you that's like he get in trouble for turning in the card too early at 18 situation, potentially. Again for him, which is hilarious. I hope he keeps doing it.
I hope he does too, because I hate this idea that it's like we've got to keep edging this out so ESPN can like give like 3 more minutes airtime to Mel Kiper.
Yeah, like we don't care, bro. Let's just keep this thing going.
It's in the dinosaurs.
I don't know what I think about offensive line early in the first round. Like, I'm pretty against kind of that Peter Skoronski stuff that was happening earlier in the draft process, where a couple local beat guys mocked him to the Lions at 6. We didn't even mention that as a nightmare scenario, but I'd be pretty against that.
That's a little.
I don't know. Again, it's kind of the same Darnell Wright. Like, do you just start him at right guard and then move him to tackle? Because that's a lot easier said than done, first of all. And two, like, Skoronski's got the short arms. I don't even know if I'd really like Skoronski at 18, if I'm being completely honest. I get why everyone loves Darnell Wright. He shut down Will Anderson. He's got some really, really good tape there. But I'm just kind of scratching my head on the value there. Like, a guard that you eventually turn into a tackle, first round doesn't seem right for that. Get a guy that you're sure is going to be your starter at a specific position the entire time. And so I'm not in love with that idea. Like, guard. The value for a guard, if that's what you're trying to get, is always in that day 2. Like, late second round, early third round is. I mean, Steve Avila is the guy that everyone keeps talking about. I don't know if he makes it to the third round, probably not. But there are other good options there at guard that I would rather just wait and get the value there than maybe go for this guard future tackle hybrid thing that sounds good on paper, but I don't know how easy it is in practice.
It's hard. That's pretty hard to throw together. Yeah. Anyway.
It's true.
I think we got through it. I think that's I think we've covered everything.
Hendon Hooker at 18, nightmare or dream?
Honestly, that would be my nightmare. I don't think I gave a nightmare scenario. I think that would be it.
Wake up screaming nightmare. Wake up screaming bloody murder.
Buying, like, I think Hendon Hooker has a future in this league as a backup, as a QB2, as a career QB2. That seems to be where he's going, but I'm sorry. I cannot see where people see him as a starter talent. Not with the college system that he played at Tennessee, not at 25 coming off of a torn ACL.
Hendon Hooker in the first round is nasty work.
Like, I guess the thing I can't figure out is the people who would want to poo-poo on Anthony Richardson and then turn around and embrace Hendon Hooker.
Fair. I'd be a little bit more open to you guys, but it's definitely, if we're talking like on the meter of dream versus nightmare, it's definitely closer to nightmare.
Yeah. I would need some explanations. But anyway.